Maybe they know each other.
Yeah, it's deep in the tournament, too.
Yeah, done some scouting.
Thoughtseize sees a couple Eidolons, a Rift Bolt, a Boros Charm, and Lava Spike?
Yeah, it looks like Spike. So no turn 1 creature coming Russell's way unless one comes off the top from Bryan and Carey.
Suspend Rift Bolt. Lee will fetch again, Scalding Tarn, and finds Basic Island to 16.
What a master. I'm not nearly I mean, I always fetch shock on 1, you know. Then again, I don't know what my opponent's playing.
It is certainly different in the
Maybe
dark.
I should assume.
They're all on burn.
Everyone's a burn opponent.
Rift Bolt off suspend, Lee to 13.
Would not be surprised if Carey here chooses not to play Eidolon the Great Revel. So he's going to be under a bit of duress from this Gurmag Angler. And if he wants to play the Eidolon, he's going to be dealing himself a bit of damage with his own spells. And it is going to be a racing scenario. But with that said, Russell Lee probably going to take care of the Eidolon so that he can play a few more spells this game.
The Island Swap mana base also a little rough. Won't necessarily be able to kill the Eidolon and deploy another threat this turn.
Sure.
So Lee's going to play Pluto Delta, attack with the Angler. That connects. Carry to 14. Lee passes.
Wouldn't be surprised to see Russell deploy like a Snapcaster Mage here to potentially block. We'll see if Carey has the answer. I know the last time we checked just had Boros Charm and Lava Spike.
I believe Swift Spear was the draw for turn.
Swift Spear. That's a nice looking Odyssey mountain from Carey, not going to lie.
Is that Odyssey?
Want to bet it?
No, I was wondering. I can't really see the set symbol. I didn't play then.
Sure is.
Thought it might have been Invasion. But you would certainly know better than I would, because you're older and wiser.
I'm definitely older.
Carey will deploy the Swift Spear, takes 2 off the Eidolon to 12, and an attack with both creatures.
Now, Snapcaster Mage block here from Russell, if he doesn't have something like Fatal Push, makes a lot of sense. He's going to take some damage. Snapcaster Mage is pretty embarrassing in the face of Eidolon the Great Revel. Now, what Bryan Carey can do here is he can actually give his creatures indestructible if he so chooses, but that is going to make him fetch, and he's going to deal himself some damage from his own Eidolon if he wants to Boros Charm, and he's going to miss out on the direct damage from the Boros Charm.
So the Snapcaster Mage, I believe this put Lee to 11, and Russell's blocking the Eidolon.
Or trying to. Now, Carey, I think, probably going to just let this Eidolon die if I was him. And then Boros Charm, or I guess you Boros Charm before damage just to get the extra from the Monster Swift Spear. But the dealing 2 to yourself is not irrelevant in the face of this Gurmag Angler. So, yeah, he even chooses to just wait.
Yeah, damage happens. 1 comes across, Lee to 9.
Should be 10. 2 from the
snap, you're right,
and then 1 from the Swift Spear because it didn't get pumped.
Might be getting ahead of myself. I'm assuming the fetch land's cracked. Yeah,
oh,
so
yeah,
now he's going to 9. Carey will respond. Doesn't want to get stubborn denialed. Boros Charm knocks Lee to 5. And Carey to 11 off the fetch.
And he's also at 11, not 10, so Temur Battle Rage is not even a lethal effect here. So Russell gonna maybe need to hold back this Gurmag Angler unless he has Bull plus Temur Battle Rage this turn.
Steam Vents was the find. Lee attacks with the Angler, Carey to 6.
2 copies of Lava Spike in hand. Does Russell have a Stubborn Denial
and he knows
a blocker?
He knows about one of those spikes as well. And most of the burn deck is just more spikes.
That's kind of their whole thing.
Yeah.
Now, I think Russell actually has a Thoughtseize and a Stubborn Denial. So if he does both of those things, he might end the game at 1 life if Bryan Carey draws a land for the turn.
Doesn't feel great to Thoughtseize here, but you're right. It's at least gaining 1 life versus Lava Spike.
Right. Now, I would have liked to have seen Russell do this before attacking, because if he sees a hand that he can't beat, like Lava Spike plus Goblin Guide or something, you know, he can choose to hold back the Gurmag Angler.
So Lee Thoughtseize is one of the spikes down to 3.
If he has Stubborn Denial, he's alive.
Stubborn Denial catches the other. Ooh, and the last card in Carey's hand is a land.
Yeah, so if he attacks here, he puts Russell to 1, not lethal. And Carey just has land in hand, but Russell can only attack back for 5 to put Carey to 1 as well. So we may actually have a staring contest until one person draws a non-land card.
Swiftspear's attacking for 2, lead down to 1. I gotta say, I have loved the navigation on both sides.
I agree completely.
Angler rumbles across. Things are tied at 1 each. Tap a 3 for Lee. Another Gurmag Angler. Blocker online.
Cross your fingers.
It's something, Canyon. Redraw.
Oh, it's a Goblin Guide. That's enough.
All right, that's 2 creatures, and yeah,
Ooh,
they'll come across.
Man. What a close game.
Really tight game there. Bryan Carey is now up, though. Players going to the sideboards. You can check out the players' deck lists and sideboards using the Cardboard Live extensions on your screen. Russell Lee's got a couple Plague Engineers, 2 Abrades, 3 Disdainful Strokes, 2 Kolaghan's Commands, a Spell Snare, a Terminate, a Liliana the Last Hope, 2 Collective Brutalities, and a Duress.
So I like a bit of the cheap interaction in this particular matchup. Collective Brutality is this pretty common sideboard card that shines against these burn strategies. Not only can it kill one of their early creatures, it also occasionally lets you hit a card from their hand and drain them for 2 and save yourself some of those precious life points. It's not quite as good in the Grixis Death Shadow deck just because your life total wants to be hovering below 13 for the most part to make sure Death Shadow can come online. So you have to play this delicate balance with your life total as the Grixis Shadow pilot. The Duress is quite good here, I think. Terminate, any sort of removal I think is pretty good. Kolaghan's Command, Abrade, all these cards can come in this matchup.
So for Bryan Carey on the burn side of things, sideboards a couple Grim Lavamancers, 3 Core Firewalker, 2 Path to Exile, 4 Skullcrack, and 4 Smash to Smithereens.
The only card I care about here is Path to Exile. That one's definitely coming in, or definitely should come in, because hitting that Gurmag Angler or Death Shadow turns off Stubborn Denial and allows you to attack with your creatures for the last 2 points of damage. Outside of that, I think Grim Lavamancer could pose some significant problems for Russell and really help overload his spot removal because he doesn't have very much. And Grim Lavamancer represents a lot of kind of instant speed damage that doesn't turn on Death Shadow until you're ready to go for the kill.
Players looking at opening hands for the sideboard games. Russell Lee will be on the play. Both players taking a mulligan. This is a really close matchup, and when matchups are close, it is really interesting to discuss who a mulligan on both sides benefits more.
Yeah.
Who do you think comes out ahead in a double mulligan?
I think Grixis Shadow comes out ahead. Grixis Shadow has a lot of kind of mediocre cards in the matchup, whereas Burn's cards are all just straight 5s or 6s, except for Eidolon, which is a clear 10. And I think Bryan's burn deck really needs a lot of those resources to survive, where Grixis Shadow deck can actually win the game with like 3 or 4 cards still left in hand.
Sure.
So I think the low resource battle definitely favors the Shadow opponent in most matchups.
Yeah, just like a Thought Scour and an Angler can get you going.
Right.
Both players keeping on 6. Lee starting by fetching Watery Grave. No fear this time. Shocking to 17.
Maybe just has a heavy shadow draw and needs to deal himself some damage. Has a Fatal Push too, which is nice.
Starts on the Serum Visions. Draws and scries 2 to the bottom.
This could be kind of a desperation dig for threats. A lot of times when you just snap both the bottom, you either need mana or you need creatures. And that's all land in those top 2, so it's got to be looking for creatures.
Turn 1 for Carey as a Monastery Swiftspear, often inspiring Vantage. Lead a 16 from the attack, and no second land.
I lied.
Certainly explains the shock and the scry 2 to the bottom. Carey is going to play a land and attack for 1. And Eidolon of the Great Revel followed up. That's tagged by Spell Snare.
Spell Snare. I didn't know that was in his list. Holy jeez, Batman.
That was 1 on the sideboard, right? Yeah. 1 in the sideboard.
That's a good one.
I've Spell Snared a lot of cards out of burn decks over the years.
Oh, yeah.
Nice.
They are heavy in the good 2-drop department, so Spell Snare feels real nice against them.
Lee unfortunately misses the second land again on the 3rd turn. Carey is going to make his 3rd land drop. Lightning Helix pre-combat. Lead to 12. Carey to 23. Skewer the critics. Lead to 9 if this resolves.
Yeah, I believe he's got to burn the Fatal Push on the Swiftspear now, though. That 3 damage coming across is a little too much.
And he will. Swiftspear down. Go back to Lee. Can he finally make a land drop? Draw was Mishra's Bauble. He'll use Duress to take Skullcrack out of Carey's hand. Only card left over is Sacred Foundry. Lee will bobble. Draw on upkeep. So saw Carey's draw. See if we see it in a second here. Looks like it's a spell.
It's another Skullcrack. That one can prevent Collective Brutality from gaining some life. Russell, though, does find a second land. Let's see if he can deploy a threat this turn.
Sacred Foundry Go was Carey's play. Just that one that one known. Mostly unknown to us, but both players have seen it.
Oh, yeah, that was the bobble. Okay.
Right.
Yeah, I'm dumb. I was like, wait, how? What? Huh?
Yeah. Well, much the way that Lee knew he was playing against Burn in game one, you know.
Right. All right, fetch up Island here. I think this is a symptom of Russell's hand being pretty heavy with the card Thought Scour. Also looks like he has a Thoughtseize in hand, which is a fairly dead one at the moment. Definitely just digging for creatures, and a 5/5 Death Shadow comes down.
Shadow was a good find. Carey will end step Skullcrack, lead a 5 off of that. Shadow now an 8/8, though Carey's at 23.
Yeah, and drew a fetch line off the top, so here comes 8 damage at least coming across.
Now Lee is untapping and has at least one Stubborn Denial in hand.
Yeah, so he's got one draw step locked up for the most part.
Attack for 8, Carey to 15, pass, draw pass on Carey's side, end step, Lee will Thought Scour himself. Drew a land. Looks like a Steam Vents.
Yeah, another attack for 8 here coming across, though. And with Stubborn Denial in hand, I don't think that Carey actually has a way out here.
Steam Vents tapped, attack for 8, Carey to 7. Lee passes, Carey draws for turn.
He's going to go for it. He's got Spike now off the draw, and he has Skullcrack, so.
Lava Spike you, Stubborn Denial. Pass. Shadow is lethal. Yep, and Shadow will wrap things up in game number 2. Russell Lee ties things against Bryan Carey. We're going to game 3.
Yeah, but you never want to be on the draw against Burn in game 3. No matter what deck you're playing in the format, on the draw against Burn is always, always scary.
Yes. Something you've been saying all weekend. I never beat Burn.
I never beat it when I lose the roll, and I rarely beat it even when I do win the roll. But that, I think, has more of a more to do with the decks I like to play than anything, because Snapcaster Mage is pretty embarrassing against the card Eidolon the Great Revel, and Eidolon really punishes decks that kind of dirtle around with Serum Visions and such, and those are definitely my wheelhouse. Now, with that said, you know, I have played stuff like Jund before, and I think Jund is okay against Burn because you have Discard into Tarmogoyf is a really strong sequence against them.
I also rarely have a particularly positive Burn matchup. I think the best it ever was 4 Spell Snare Grixis.
That's a nice one.
That was nice.
Spell Snare is pretty great against them. You ever died with Spell Snare in hand, though, because they just hard cast a Rift Bolt?
That would always happen when I played a Magic Online against the mono red bills.
Yeah.
Like, what's the Shard Volley? The sacrifice of land speed damage? Like, it's obviously worse than Lightning Helix, but you can't Spell Snare it.
Yeah.
So I've lost that one on the deck red sheet plenty.
All right, this is it. This match, winner likely making the top 8. Don't want to say definitively because tiebreakers occasionally swing one way or another.
Looks like Carey keeping on 7 on the play. Lee going to 6.
I think this is an important spot for Russell to understand what's important and what's not with his deck and choosing to mulligan hands that just won't get there. The previous hand had a bit of interaction with Spell Snare, Fatal Push, and a couple of Thought Scours. So that one, even though he missed on land for a while, was good enough to keep up with the burn draw. And he's just going to be looking for something very similar this game.
Looks like he keeps on 6 and puts a Duress on the bottom. Carey is going to start sacrificing Bloodstained Mire. See if he goes to 19 or 17. He will be attacking Lee to 19 with this Monastery Swift Spear. And he fetched up basic mountain, so it's going to be 19 all.
I gotta say, Monastery Swift Spear is the worst one drop between that and Goblin Guide. If you're on the draw against the burn deck, you're very happy to see the 1 damage come across instead of 2. Even though they can potentially do some more burst damage later on, that's the one attack that you can't really interact with, and that's the one attack that does 1 instead of 2, and that 1 point is miles different in some spots.
Lee will start by bobbling Carey. Swamp Go, draws for the bobble in upkeep.
That means he likes his hand if he bobbles Carey instead of himself, or he just didn't have a fetch land to play.
Swiftspear attacks, lead at 18. Post-combat, Carey is going to use another fetch land. Deploying Eidolon of the Great Revel. He's shocked for it off Sacred Foundry. And Lee's going to Fatal Push that one, so both players at 16 after the trigger.
Yeah, another Fatal Push off the top. That should be able to check at least the Swiftspear. Might want to take another 1-point hit or to see if Carey deploys a couple of burn spells here to try to pump the Swiftspear. Usually that's when you want to attack Swiftspear, when they've kind of shown their hand, you know, and let you know exactly what's going on.
Looks like a fistful of spells for Carey as he draws up to a 5th card. Goblin Guide deployed pre-combat. See if he adds a spell to pump the Swiftspear.
Yeah, Lava Spike here are going to be the one to cast. Sorcerer Speed doesn't really have another valid target for the most part. Least tricky of all of them.
So Lava Spike targeting Lee. That resolves. Lee to 13. And an attack with 2/2 power creatures. With the Goblin Guide trigger on the stack, Lee is going to fetch to 12.
So he wants to go ahead and fetch Steam Vents probably, and he's doing this because if he naturally draws the Steam Vents, that's pretty horrific for his hand. Could be just like Blood Crypt or whatever if he's just heavy on black cards, but doesn't really want to draw a fetch land.
Yeah, big thing when
land.
Goblin Guy is attacking you too is if you want to draw a land, you let the trigger resolve, then you fetch. If you want to draw a spell, you fetch, and then if your top card's a land, you draw it, and then you get a draw step.
Right.
So he fetches up, Watery Grave tapped, revealed Teamer Battle Rage. Probably not the spell he wanted immediately.
No, but that could be one that closes the door in one attack step with Death Shadow in a few turns.
So he'll Fatal Push the Swiftspear. 2 comes across from the guide, lead to 10.
Yeah, but no land drop from Carey. If I'm Russell, I'm sweating because that means there's 3 spells in hand on the other side. That's pretty terrifying.
Well, Inquisition is going to take a look and take one of them. It's 2 Lightning Bolts and a Lightning Helix. Mana efficiency makes sense. 1 bolt is taken.
Stubborn Denial, though, from Lee in hand. Does he have a creature to play this turn? Gurmag Angler or Death Shadow both would be pretty good here.
Plays Scalding Tarn as the land for the turn. Fetches that immediately. Going to 9.
Curious if he gets a tapped land and plays Gurmag, or if he shocks himself and plays Death Shadow.
Looks like a tap Steam Vents.
Might even get a tap land and play Shadow.
Just getting it up to 4.
Yeah.
Tap land Angler is the play.
So you want the red source, but you don't want to deal yourself damage. A land here would have been great for Carey because that would have allowed him to double burn the Gurmag and shut down the aggression. It would have taken a lot of his resources to do it, but now, though, it's kind of a staring contest, and Russell does have Teamer Battle Rage in hand.
So Eidolon's the play for Carey. Back on Lee's side, plays Polluted Delta, 2 cards in hand. One of them is the Battle Rage that both players have seen. And Lee will pass back to Carey.
Eidolon of the Great Revel was a fantastic draw for Carey because now if Russell does want to use that Stubborn Denial, it still deals him 2 damage. There's not a whole lot he can do. I don't even think he should crack this fetch land. I think that land is effectively dead.
Carey draws and passes. Lee does refuse to crack the fetch land. Draws for his turn, just passes back. Except Carey's going to fire something off. It's Boros Charm. Eidolon puts Carey to 14. Boros Charm, if it resolves, puts Lee to 5.
Yeah, and even if he Stubborn Denials, he's still at 7. Carey can untap, throw maybe 1 or 2 more burn spells at the face, puts Russell down to 1. He's no longer able to cast spells.
It is precarious. And drawing Battle Rage without Shadow is really unfortunate in this pairing. So Lee fires off Stubborn Denial. Carey's on that trigger, though. Lee goes to 7 from the Eidolon.
Yeah, and it is a trigger you can miss, so there's always a chance that Russell gets a freebie here if Carey does mess up.
Back to Bryan Carey. I believe the draw for turn was Rift Bolt.
My guess, suspend Rift Bolt here. End of turn Bolt, untap, have Helix. Try to go for lethal that way. It's going to be pretty tough for Russell to get out of this one. Bryan has stopped on 2 lands, and that is a disaster for any deck that is trying to win a longer game against Burnt.
Rift Bolt Suspend is the play for Carey.
I think maybe Bryan is trying to figure out if he wants to attack or not, but I guess my guess he's just going to pass turn. The Eidolon is kind of keeping Russell in check. Very little reason to do anything here.
Yeah, kind of thinking about what could go wrong.
Well, what could go wrong? So Bryan actually has Russell has the Teamer Battle Rage, and the Eidolon of the Great Revel is potentially bad for Carey. So like right now, if Russell just attacks with Gurmag Angler, Carey just has to block with Goblin Guide, right? Because if Carey doesn't block with Goblin Guide, a Teamer Battle Rage puts Russell to 5, but the Teamer Battle Rage also puts Bryan to 4. Red Bolt puts him to 2, puts Russell to 2, and then attack with Eidolon. Never mind. I don't know. This is tough.
This is a mess.
Eidolon
It is
Great
kind of
Revel.
interesting for Lee that Carey's going to have to cast that Rift Bolt, and if the Eidolon's still around, take 2. Not clear they'll be able to capitalize on it, because if Lee attacks with the Angler, you just throw the Eidolon in the way. So probably won't be able to.
Well, he throws Eidolon or the Goblin Guide in the way. The Teamer Battle Rage does give Trample and Double Strike, so it will still deal 8, but it won't be quite enough to deal lethal, and the Eidolon, sticks around and still locks Russell out of being able to cast spells.
Yeah, sort of an interesting question as to who the Eidolon is worse for. I think at face value, it looks like it's worse for Lee.
Yeah.
But the way that Lee could win this game would be finding the way to make it worse for Carey. Though I don't know if he has that.
Russell here, really in the tank. I think he might actually end up swinging with a Gurmag here. He knows that he's likely going to die because he knows the other 2 cards in Bryan Carey's hand. So I think he has to make the Eidolon of the Great Revel bad in some way, or try to make it bad in some way. But he might be able to get out from underneath the Eidolon if he attacks. He might actually entice Bryan to block. And then if he has a follow-up creature, he might actually be able to get out of this.
Some kind of spell forthcoming.
Seems like a Thought Scour for me. That's no good.
Lee really in the tank about this. It's a tough spot, game 3. Razor sharp margins against Burn. Playing for top 8. It is Thought Scour. Eidolon will put Lee to 5. Teamer Battle Rage 2 lands. Lee does not have anything, and he's got to pack him up. Bryan Carey advances to 12 and 3.
Yeah, Burn once again doing Burn things. That clutch Eidolon of the Great Revel off the top. It's not about how much damage it does. It's about how much damage it represents, because it also just cuts your opponent off from being able to cast X number of spells in a single turn. Like, there were multiple spots where Russell had to choose between casting nothing or taking 2 damage, and most of the time chose to just cast nothing. And Eidolon is occasionally one of those cards that you don't really know the impact of it until your opponent shows you their hand.
Right.
And at the end of the game there, like, Teamer Battle Rage uncastable, Thought Scour virtually uncastable, he died immediately. No matter what he drew off the top, I'm pretty sure he's dead to the Rift Bolt, Lightning Bolt.
Right. You know what that means?
What?
It means we covered Burn 4 times this weekend, and it won
Every
all 4
time?
matches.
Hell yeah.
Burn looking like a really nice deck if you want to play regionals next weekend. Pretty strong contender.
I mean, Eidolon of the Great Revel is one hell of a card. I don't think the deck is good without it. And I think Eidolon is just one of the Punisher cards in the format that really makes it hard to justify playing stuff like Paradox Outcome or Just Guy Ascendancy Emery,
Yeah, all these decks that cast low-cost cards and cantrips have to cycle through their deck. But anyway, that's going to do it for the Swiss rounds here from SCG Indianapolis. That means that pretty soon we're going